Let me just find my, well, I have my thing of questions, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to follow any questions at all today because this is going to be very different. I really appreciate you sending over the copy of the book. I did not have a chance to go through it very much, so I'm going to be seating my pants tonight, but you can help guide me. Yeah, you can tell me what's important to know about the book. Time is getting very weird. I'm going to my 30-year high school reunion this year. And that's just insanity. I'm officially, I just hit 48 on Friday, so I think I'm officially pushing 50. I can't deny that anymore. And it's like, it's just strange. It's a strange world. You see the passage of time, you know you're growing, you know things are changing and all that, and then you start approaching 50 and you're like, oh wait, I'm not, oh, you can hear me? Well, that's a bummer, but hello. I hope you can just hear me and not my guests. Hold on. Why? Oh, why can you hear me? But hi, Jen. Oh, there's my mic. Why is it on this? That is very weird. And it looks like it's picking up a lot of noise too. What is happening? If I go over to here. Testing. Yeah. Whoops. Hello. Actually, forget the countdown. I'm not ready for the countdown yet because welcome to the Transgender show and all that. I will do the official version in a second. I've taken to getting the housekeeping stuff out of the way before we do the countdown. That way we can just kind of have a nice clean edit. And then I was just like, I started the countdown. I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. Hi, everybody. So, hi, Katie. So yes, I'm frazzled. I'm very frazzled this week. It was my birthday on Friday. I had some other just big life stuff happen this week, and been at a hard time getting my feet under me. But here we are. So my guests will not be able to see chat. So, you know, if you have any questions or comments, please keep them coming in, but they won't be able to see them live. Then once we take our break, they can join in on the chat, or at that point, I will give them all of your comments and all of your questions. We'll answer anything that you have for our guests or for myself. So feel free to ask anything. And then if they don't feel comfortable asking, they can let us know. Was there anything else? I guess I just wanted to make sure that y'all can hear me. And when we go in, I guess I'll bring the guests in for just a quick little thing here, just to do an audio check, because I'm doing something new this time around on the back end. And of course, that has a chance of messing everything up. So everybody get a sneak preview of our guests, Katie and Nia. Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
hi.
All right. So I'm seeing you on my end when you said hello. Y'all in chat, can you hear them?
Hi, can you hear us?
We can hear them. Great. That means everything is
Yay.
set up correctly. Um, it's a lot. I'll just give a quick reasoning why I'm changing things. Audio stuff happens on this show. There's dogs that bark. There's things that happen, and it's very important to separate out the audio channels, something I've never been able to do before. I'm learning how to do this, and that's what we're implementing today. For y'all, everything should be coming through good. And then on the recording that I'm doing at the same time, everything should be separated out very nicely. So wish me luck on that. But yeah, computer stuff is fun. Live stuff is even more fun. And then, you change stuff and it all goes out the window. I'm going to quit blabbing, and I think we're ready to run the countdown. What do you say we do a show, huh? Let's do it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, I am very excited because the guests we have on the show are a pair of authors. Been doing several of them recently. Tonight, we have Nia and Katie. Now, if Nia looks or sounds familiar, it's because she was guest number 20 on the Transgender Show way back in the day, in the first season. Why they're here tonight is to talk about a new book that they've written. When Nia came out as a trans woman to Katie, she knew she would be met with a loving response, but she was less sure where this would lead their relationship, their marriage, and their family. Even murkier was what would happen when they began to bring their extended family, friends, and broader community alongside them on their journey to identify and begin the formation as a queer family. They needed a guide for what lay ahead. Now, drawing on their experience as well as their expertise in psychology, spirituality, and family systems, Nia and Katie offer the tools they wish they'd had for their journey. Embracing Queer Family is a guidebook for queer families on how to live into their true selves and strengthen their communities through radical love, acceptance, and mutual healing. As I said, I'm very excited to welcome back to the show Nia and now her wife, Katie. Welcome in.
Hi.
Thanks.
Thank
Happy
you
to
all so
be
much
here.
for being here, and I'm so glad that we have an opportunity to bring you back on, Nia, and get an update.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm
Yeah.
glad we could both do it together too. It's fun.
So yeah, it was 2020 when we had you on the first time. It's now 2024. So
Yeah.
have there been any big updates to your story, to what's been going on with you in your transition since then?
Yeah.
Do you remember 2024?
Yeah, 2020. 2020. Yeah, so I was out at that point when we talked last, and we were living in Iowa. And where we had lived our whole life before a big move to Maryland and the East Coast. So that was a big change for us. But really, nothing. I mean, what? Transition wise, I mean, we have 5 kids, so like, there's a lot of things that have happened, and but for me, it's been life. It's been more of like back to the life that we had lived before I started transitioning, because we've been married for 20 years now. So we had built this life, and it kind of flipped upside down a little bit when I transitioned, and we're kind of back into that flow of life at this point.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you feel like you've been able to kind of go back to a status quo, like all systems normal with your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, as much as they can be, we have family and friends who, have come and gone out of our lives. And, um, I still have immediate family and stuff that there are some relational hardships, I would say. And other than that, though, I think when we were able to move and kind of get out of the environment where I came out, and we've lived our whole life, and we had a church system that we were in and all this other stuff, it was much easier for us than to just settle into normal, I guess, for us,
Yeah.
which is not normal at all. We have 5 kids, 14, 13, 12, 11, 6, and one with a disability. So what is normal, right? And 2 moms, 1 trans.
We're back to our normal.
It's pretty normal for us now. Yeah.
It will change again very soon.
It's calm. It's calm for the moment, which is
We
nice.
just have to, as we go along, make our own normal. You always think growing up
That's
or
right.
experiencing life that there is a real normal and there's something that you're supposed
There's
to adhere to. And that's one of the great things about coming out as trans, isn't it? That you realize there's no such thing as normal, not even
Nope.
vaguely.
No.
Right.
No, but there is calm, and that's where we're sort of at right
Yeah,
now.
peaceful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good.
So what was it specifically that prompted the move to Maryland?
You want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Why not? It's so hard to really pinpoint a prompt. If you want our go-to answer would be, well, Nia got a job out here and we decided that we were that it was time to come out and move away and kind of embark on our own adventure. But that is the truth. But behind the scenes of that was someone, myself, who was really kind of falling apart at the seams, having difficulty reintegrating my life into this whole system that had turned upside down, and navigating a place that was full of trauma triggers for me, not just from Nia's coming out, but just so much. 40 years of life lived in one place. And so I was struggling. I was struggling with the day-to-day tasks of living, kind of surrounded in that environment. So you can tell your story.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I had a good queer community in Iowa, and Des Moines has a particularly good, tight-knit queer community. And so I was involved in that. However, I didn't realize how much stress there was on the day-to-day, just living in a state that does not support trans people and really is anti-trans at this point. And so the fighting that you're doing all the time, and the looks you get at the restaurants and the gas stations and all of that, for those who live in the South, the Midwest, any place that is not liberal, what I'm talking about. And it just kind of over time compounds. And I didn't really realize it was there until we left. And then once we got here, I was like, oh, this is different for sure. And we're not worried, to Katie's point, about running into people we have strained relationships with at the grocery store and things like that, which is just, in a smaller Midwestern city, it happens.
Yeah, it's great to be in a place where we're seen as ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't have to make excuses for why we're not the way we used to be.
Yeah.
Because don't we all who have grown know what it's like to do that? So I think it was a great fresh start for us.
Well, and I wonder if it was very similar for you, kind of what I experienced when I came out. You come out to the broader world, and then you just keep running into people that you haven't come out to yet. So you just kind of got to keep retreading that over and over again, even if it's been months.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh yeah. All the time.
Yeah. And people in particular with Katie would kind of pretend like they hadn't heard, but really everybody knew that, I had transitioned. And so it was awkward and weird.
Yeah, it was better for our mental health to say, okay, let's go somewhere where we can heal.
One of the things that I hear that partners struggle with a lot is the new definition. First off, you've got to kind of redefine and re-examine your own sexuality and you know, how am I going to identify to the public? Do I still identify as straight, or you know, is there something else? I read in the introduction to your book that, you know, this that Nia is coming out gave you, Katie, a sort of chance to kind of reevaluate things. And it, in the book, it was spun in a positive light. Was
Mhm.
that how it hit you at first, or was there some struggle for you?
Oh my goodness. Struggle, struggle, struggle. But this is, I mean, I want to clarify and say I find struggle very beautiful. And so while it is so difficult, and there were really times that were, I mean, downright just so hard, you know, lying on your bathroom floor hard. There's those moments. Um, but that struggle, I think, made it more beautiful when I came to my own realizations of who I am and how Nia allowed me to be myself in all the stages of our relationship, which is really lovely. I like to say that Nia gifted me the awareness of my own queerness. And that's really true because we've loved each other since, I mean, really middle school. My friends used to joke that I was a Nia sexual. They're like, you don't need a label. You're just a Nia sexual. And I said, well, that's great, but I think we need to be more like kind to me and to Nia just in case, you know, anything ever were to happen.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's probably true.
And so in
Yeah.
that, Katie, what was the biggest struggle for you? What were the
Yeah.
big things you were struggling with? Was it more your own self-acceptance and understanding what this meant for you, or was the greater thing, okay, how am I going to live out in the world? Like, what's the rest of the world going to think of me?
Oh my goodness. I think that question is untangle. You know, there's no like, yes. There's no simple way to answer that question because so many things come in waves. When you are the partner of someone who comes to you and says, this is the reality of my identity, it is like a huge explosion, right? Because if you're not prepared for that, and I had some like signs and inklings, but no, I never thought that we were going to go down this road. And so everything explodes at once. And then it felt like putting pieces back together. And then when you look at the pieces and you say, do I want this piece of me to come on the rest of this journey with me, or do I not? You know, you're able to let go of pieces of your ego. And as you let pieces of your ego go, pieces of your true self get to shine through. And you kind of, I did anyway, realized over time that number one, for me, labels are not as important. And I know for lots of people they are. They help give us identity, they help set us in a direction. For me, I needed to let go of all my labels so that I could really understand who I am. And for me, I'm like kind of a free bird and I want to do everything my own way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So by letting go, it was really that process of letting go, detaching myself from everything that I thought that I was and letting myself learn about me again. I mean, and in some ways for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
which was really great because it led to this discovery that I like to say I'm ambiguously queer because the reality is I'm most likely pansexual, but I'm like, I have to be weird. So let's just say ambiguously queer so I don't have to put a label on it, put a pin on it.
We can't say hella in front of it.
Hella ambiguously queer.
I mean,
Or ambiguously hella queer.
or just hella queer. Can we just say?
Oh, I'm hella queer.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I'm hella
Okay.
queer.
Okay.
But, you know, that was just one part of my own personal discovery. You know, I found out a lot about my own vocation in life by taking this journey together. And I was working as a lay minister for almost 20 years in paid and unpaid roles, but that was my vocation. And when that kind of crumbled, I had to look and say, oh, what is truly my vocation? You know, what is the thing that I love to do? Which I realized I love bearing witness to people. I love being with them. I love guiding. So I became a birth doula during this whole process, which was amazing. I became a spiritual guide during this process, was amazing. And then through all of that, I was able to understand that my brain just works differently. And right before my 40th birthday was diagnosed ADHD. And so like this whole picture really started coming together for me. So it wasn't just, none of us are just one facet of who we are. And I think that the invitation to my own queerness allowed me to go even deeper into who I truly am. And I'm so grateful for that.
That's very wonderful. So have you settled on any labels for yourself, or are there things that you use to define yourself? Do you find that helps you now, or have you just gone beyond the labels?
I hate to say beyond the labels because I know each person needs what they need. And for me, I need open, I need space. And so, yeah, I kind of live in this place of I'm me. And whatever that means, I guess, is what it means. I'll take queer. I'll take hella queer, I guess. But I appreciate living in a space where I'm not easily definable. And because that helps me not cling so hard to myself either, because I've learned that wasn't healthy for me, So I get to be free in my own mind as well. And for me, that's really important.
What were some of the how did some of the early conversations go with Nia when she came out to you? And at this point, it's been a while, but what do you kind of remember about that time period?
Oh my gosh. Did you want to tell the initial?
What's the initial story for
The
you?
gift.
Sure. So the very initial conversation we had, well, really, was my birthday, and we went out for drinks and dinner, and there was like $2 margaritas, which is always a recipe for disaster. And Katie, knowing me really well, knows that I'm the opposite. I need the label because I had no definition of myself before as a repressed trans woman. And so she also knew my personality, knew that some things about it, which were I like comfort. I am a person who loves to like curl up and have a book and be by the fire and all of that. And so she bought me some pajamas that were really nice and comfortable. And they were feminine, honestly. And I opened them, and she thought she hit the nail on the head. And I, 2.5, 3 drinks in, was like, no, you missed the mark. Like, this should have been more feminine. This should have been. And so we went down this road where I was like angry with her for not seeing all of me when I didn't see all of me at that point in time either. Um, and from there, it just kind of snowballed. And we had to have a longer conversation, which you can talk about some of those.
Yeah, that sounds like a rough start for it, Katie. You just, that it sounds like you knew some things, or you perceived. Were there conversations before that point, before the gift?
We had one very, very early on in our relationship. And I think Mia had tried to like drop little hints here and there, but I am like a very like, okay, kind of person. And you're going to have to tell me if you want to tell me, because I don't, okay, sounds great, And so there had been just a discussion of like, oh, sometimes I wear women's clothes. And I was like, okay. And I think she knew now is not the right time.
We were young.
We were
that was
very
like,
young.
we were like 21.
Yeah, early in our
that happened.
marriage. And by the time that we got to this conversation, we had adopted a child from China. We already had 2 kids at home, 3 biological kids at home. We adopted it when he was 3.5. Our life had already turned completely upside down because we had 4 young kids under the age of 5. We were in like stress mode, all the time. And both of us were just trying to find anything to cling to. And so I think we were so raw at that point anyway, that I knew whatever she was saying to me was, number one, true, and not like just off the top of her head. And number 2, needed to be taken seriously by me. And so I remember like having this sense of like, ooh, you know, and not really even thinking to myself, but knowing like you need to ask questions, you need to be gentle, but you need to know what you need to know, and that's fine. But most importantly, you just need to listen. And so I'm a huge talker. If you cannot tell, I want to talk all the time. And I want to tell you what to do. And I want to give you all the advice. And so, what I found I struggled the most with was just being quiet enough to hear her. And I'm hoping that I think I did a good job. But that was what was difficult for me was saying, like, okay, for me, I'm going to deal with my identity on the side so I can really focus on her. And there'll be a time when I can pick this back up again and go through it for me. So, and when I talk to other spouses, this happens a lot of a transitioning person is you take yourself and you say, okay, I'm going to put this not to, I don't want to say I'm going to like get rid of it, but I'm going to focus my attention here so that I can love this person well into who they're going to be. And it becomes lonely. And that's what's very difficult of being the spouse is there were times when it was just lonely because nobody else really understood. And then my own identity was kind of falling apart, but I was ignoring it so I could pay attention to this. And so those were the things that I found. Her transness was not the main issue for me, which sounds wild, but it really wasn't. It was how do we navigate the people we are becoming and do it well and do it together well. And those were the things that were difficult because that means you have to pay attention to yourself and another person, and you have to be present to what's happening, and staying present when things are traumatic is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any insight into sort of what it was? You mentioned that in your 20s, when you're kind of just starting out, that it would have been too early to have that conversation and kind of work through things. At this point, when you have this initial conversation, what was different for you, and how did you see it, or how did you hear it differently when she brought it up?
Mm-hmm. Well, because when we were early married, like we said, we got married when we were 21, babies, together for a long time before that. And we grew up in a very evangelical, conservative, I would say almost fundamentalist environment. And so, and I was kind of all in on that. I wanted, I wanted to be a preacher, which wasn't allowed anyway. So I was already on the outs. But I was in a season, I think we both were in a season of maturity where we were still forming so much of our identity in that early stage of life that there would have been too much blockage because my own immaturity wouldn't have been able to handle the enormity of what that meant and hold myself and hold me at the same time. I just don't think maturity wise I could have done it. Given what I had, the tools that I had at the time. And by the time we got to, this conversation where Nia let me in on her gender journey, God, we had been through hell. We had been through a lot. We had initially had a miscarriage, and that really shook my faith that our first pregnancy was a miscarriage, which so many people experience. And inside of our community, because life begins at conception, it was like a very big deal. And that was really hard for me to kind of take in and understand. And that started kind of me on this faith journey a little bit more, broadened my faith journey a little bit more. And then when you have two kids in 16 months of each other and you're just like trying to focus on like moving your body from one place to another, and then you have another baby, and then you adopt a child with special needs, your whole life becomes, okay, what are the real essentials of who we are? What are the real essentials of what we want to do? And what are the real essentials of what we believe? Because that's all we're running on. We are not running on extras at this point. We're running on essentials. And so that kind of paring down, I think, led to a better understanding of our own identity till we got to this point where we were both like, ooh, this is not all of us. And now we were at the maturity level where we could dig deeper into what that meant for both of us. And thankfully, I think Nia led the way, which was out of character in our marriage. I usually took the first step in almost everything.
You said maturity level. I would say level of drunkenness ultimately. Like that's what happened.
Just because I didn't drink when we were 21.
Yeah, I mean that's how I ended up leading the way there. So.
No, but you were ready because
Sure.
I
just wanted to be seen.
Yeah, you
I
wanted to be seen. You get to a point in your life where that's what you want.
And when I honestly think it was out of character to even try to let her in so early when we were involved in church in such a way, because that was a non-starter. I just needed somebody to be let in on my journey and to hear me and see me, because I couldn't see myself. And so I tried to start that conversation. I don't even know why I did, because it really was not in character for us.
You were not planning
how we were living.
Sure.
Yeah. So then later it was much, much easier to unravel.
Yeah. By the time that Nia came out to me, I was like, TikTok, y'all, I know what's going on, because I'm watching it from the outside. So as she's kind of unfolding and going through her journey, I kind of go point A to point Z. I'm like real fast. And so I'm like, why don't you just come out already? I'm thinking this all the time and waiting for the time that she's going to come home. And then one day she came home from therapy. She sat me down and she said, I'm transgender. And I said, I know. But it had taken so long to get from that initial explosion to a very casual, for me, I know didn't feel that way for you, but for me, a very casual, I know. And then the next step was, well, what does that mean for everyone else in our life? But I already am cool with this, because we'd taken that journey kind of together, which was nice.
So you've both written a book together about all of this, about how to navigate this, and I love, and again, I didn't get a chance to read through it in depth, but I love, the start where you've got the three rings. You've got the individual, you've got the family, and then you've got the community. And how that goes in and out. It goes outward, where the individual seeks and needs support. They need help. And then there are certain needs that the family has and that the community has, and how that all interacts. What were some of the key things that you learned in this period, where you jumped pretty quickly to accepting Nia's identity, and now the two of you are working together, kind of figure out what that's going to be for you as individuals and then as family, and then of course after that, then you've got to think community. But what were some of those first things that then eventually would lead to this revelation for the book?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
Sure. I think we kind of did this intuitively, I guess. And when I came out, I could see, I think because there was other pressures on Katie outside of just her spouse transitioning genders, which is like a huge thing, right? So I could see this other external pressure where she was, having ultimately being scapegoated for my transition within inside of our religious community. And I could see she had her own circle in that moment, right? I'm the one that's coming out, and I had a circle, and all the focus was coming toward me at first. And then I realized when I could see her crying on the bathroom floor, right, that she has her own circle, and she also needs the support to flow in, and the garbage that's coming into her to be stopped coming into her. And so I think a lot of times when we as trans people come out, it is all about us, and it should be, because that's what we're doing. We're developing that identity. But those around us also have their own journey. And I think we realized early on, because of all the external stuff, that we had these two distinct journeys, and we had to work together on both of them. It couldn't just be Katie supporting me all the time. We had to go both ways.
Yeah. And I really love that you brought up. It's called ring theory, actually, and it's from a pair of psychologists, Silk and Goldman, and it's actually a framework for grief. And it fits so well. I think we ran across it early on when we were trying to explain to people what was going on, and we started realizing, like, whoa, the pressure of this. It's really a pressure valve release system, right? Of how do you get what you need, and so the individual's centered, right? Just like you're saying. And then you get your initial circle of support and then your outer circle of support. And what we realized during this time is that, like Mia was saying, we had to be self-differentiated enough to support each other when that was necessary, but to find our own supports when that was necessary as well. So like I had some different supports than Nia had. There were friends that did things for Nia, like go to meetings with her parents when I was like, I literally cannot get out of bed to go to that sit down with your parents. And another friend was like, I will, I'll do it. I'll go there. And then my circle of support is then my sister comes over with her kids at night. And then we like have a laugh while that's happening. So she was my pressure release valve. And then my sister's a great example because then she didn't bring her confusion and worry back to me. I mean, my sister maybe isn't a great example because she was so fantastic. She took on my need for support and then pushed out this lovely, like, blast of everything's going to be okay, everyone out there who's worried. And Katie, I can just put my arms around you because my one job is to support you through this thing. And that was really important to us, to have people that could focus solely on us as individuals as we also navigated this together as a couple. And I think it was very organic, and it was a testament to the people who were around us, who are just friggin' warriors. They are just love warriors. And they taught us what it was to rely on other people and to be held, and so that we can do that in the future, and we could continue to do it for each other and for our children. And it was huge.
Well, and you know, y'all bring up some really important points of like just how I'm just reminded at how chaotic and problematic those first that the first period is when you start to accept yourself and understand that you're trans, and what that does to your relationships that are around you, and just kind of, yeah, all of that dynamic. And the problem, it sounds like you had this, Nia, and it was the same for my story. You get to this level of understanding that you're trans and you need to come out, you need to tell people, especially some people close to you. But at that point, you don't have any clarity yourself. You don't know what you're going to need. You don't know what you're going to need to be. You don't even understand what it means fully that you're trans. And yeah, that it's just like you're saying, Katie, that then you have to have that support system. The ripples for that are really intense. I think a lot of people just kind of from the outside see you come out as trans and you know, you're just doing your thing, but there's so much more to it, and it's so nuanced and complicated. And I think that really shows why your book is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, as when we're kids, if we grow up in healthy family environments, we're scaffolded through our identity formation, right? By our familial relationships, if we're growing up in healthy systems. But when you come out, you're forming an identity as you're discovering your identity, as you have the identity. And the scaffolding is not as immediate, right? And you'd hope it would be, but that's why building that circle of support, gathering people, and sometimes it just starts with like a counselor, a therapist, you know, or a doctor, taking these, you know, small scaffoldings and making a bigger structure where it's safe enough for you to really do your self discovery, because you need to be shielded for a while you're growing. And
Mhm.
we do that with kids, and they hopefully become healthy adults. And we should be able to do that for ourselves, create that same system of safety for ourselves to grow and develop.
And the language we use in the book of letting in, you know, I did that when Katie gave me that gift, right? Like I let her in on who I was, which I didn't know. So I let her in on something that I didn't know, but I needed a safe space to start processing that. And this was that relationship for me. And then as I went along, I gathered more people. I let in on that journey and was able to push those boundaries out further, like Katie's talking about the scaffolding. And then when I came out as trans to Katie and others, I still didn't know what that meant. Like you're saying, I didn't know what the next steps were, or anything. But I had this group around me that said, great, figure it out. You've got the safety to do that. And so I think there's definitely, when your systems are falling apart or rearranging, there's this uber importance to having that ring around you that can push out your circle of safety, so you have more room to think about your identity and process your identity, and then figure out what you're going to do with it, right? Like I came out as trans. I told Katie that night, like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means, but I'm trans.
Right. And I had already bought into the fact, like, we're going to do it together. And she knew that. And so then we just go, like, okay, and jump the next hurdle together because we'd already committed that to ourselves through this process.
So you're writing this guide that is supposed to kind of help people through this process, through how you build these support systems and work through this, get the support you need, both as the trans individual, as the partner, and as some of the family members, some of the extended folks in the circle. What what have you been able to do to help the folks that are experiencing this situation in that period in the 20s where some of this stuff isn't solidified, they don't have that strong relationship yet? Do you have any good advice for those folks now that you've kind of got both perspectives?
Let me.
True ethic, yeah.
Yeah, I do think that's true. You know, I think whenever you go through any major change of life, any transition, any transformation in your life, whether you're 20 or 40 or 50 or 12, you know, you need to be able to have something that you can hang on to. You know, you need to have something that you kind of like can come back to. And for some people, that's healthy family systems, great. For some people, that's finding family, that's finding, identifying individuals who can help you, watching. You know, we have a portion of the book where we kind of talk about, like, how can you identify safe people? Because for some of us who don't have that healthy family system, we have to find it ourselves. And you're looking for clues all the time, right? You, I mean, there's great places to start: support groups, PFLAG, trusted friends, you know, even great clergy that really can help if you know that you have an affirming church. Um, but I think that that is something, sometimes we have to build our own scaffolding. And it sucks because in your 20s, you shouldn't be having to do that. You should really be able to just focus on you and still be held up. But I think that friends, family, and those people who love us, if we are vulnerable, you know, we will find our people. We'll start to build that family and that community. But sometimes those things just do start, like I said, like with a therapist, with a doctor, and then get referred from there. You know, would you want to talk more about that? Because I think like that's how you started.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I did build that network. I do want to talk about true ethic because I think even as young people, there's something that drove us, right, to be active in the church and to do all of these things. And ultimately we put a name to it as we got older, which was finding our true ethic. And for me, it's just giving people back to themselves, loving people in a way that mirrors them back to themselves so they can be more whole people, and in turn can reflect me back to me, and I can be more whole. And I believed that when I was 20.
Yeah.
I was, applying it in a different way. And so I think if people can kind of boil down, like Katie said, we had all this life experience that made us get rid of everything but the essentials, and that's kind of what did it for us.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can focus on what is actually essential for me, um, even in my 20s, I think it can get to a good place of, okay, who am I really at the core? Because we can feel that even when
What
we're
do I
20,
believe?
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really great. Nia, thanks for saying that.
Well, and you mentioned this I'm sorry, was it true ethic?
Yes.
And that thought in that the purpose of that is to, mirror back, reflect who the person is. And I feel like that's one of the big things that's missing a lot of times in a lot of relationships, and definitely in our society right now. What's reflected back is the expectation. Is this is
Mm-hmm.
what I expect you to be. This is what I see you to
Yeah.
be, and I want you to be. And growing up trans, I feel like we pick up on very early that to be loved, to be accepted, to fit into our family, into our society, we from the start have to, put on an act. We have to fit ourselves into a box. And, I think that's a really challenging thing for the people in our circles to do, and especially parents. We hear a lot of times about parents who have ideals about their children and who they want them to be and how they want them to grow up, and it can be very, very difficult to get past that. What are some of the things in the book that talk about that, and how to find those people and how to live that way, to help others see a better way of being?
Mm. Mm. That's good. I'll start at the foundation of my true ethic, which is love should be honoring and respectful to all parties. And so sometimes that means drawing boundaries around ourselves, as we grow and as we heal and as we become who we are. So protecting our becoming becomes very important. It's an important thing to do, to protect ourselves, because especially as trans people, you've been protecting yourself your whole life. So now you're learning to protect yourself without your mask anymore, and that's where boundaries become important. So you can live out your true self, but you can say, there are some things that I just cannot accept for me because I want to live out who I am. And if that's hard for you, I understand that. I might need to take some time away so that we can heal apart for a little while. And I think sometimes we want to make other people's journeys, we want to be able to pull them along and say you can do this. And the truth of the matter is we cannot do anybody's journey for them. We can do our journey as authentically and as lovingly as we possibly can. Not perfectly, mind you, because that does not exist. But I think if we are attentive to our own needs, there will be people that might say, okay, bye. But the people that we retain in our lives are the ones who really see us
Mhm.
and want to protect us and love us in the way that we need to do for ourselves too.
I mean, it's the people who are willing to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Like, as many folks know who have strained relationships, when you set up a boundary, it's because you don't want to be given the emotions of the other person that the other person is feeling and putting back on you. And so for the people who really stayed in our lives well, when they felt uncomfortable, they went back and did the work. When I felt uncomfortable with something, when Katie felt uncomfortable, and that also means we're doing our own work. And especially when it comes to sexuality for a couple, right? We're doing our own work. We may be married in the end, but we can still have a relationship if we're honoring each other and doing our own work instead of saying, this makes me super uncomfortable, so I'm gonna take my anger out on you or push it towards you because I don't understand it. And really, it's when a child comes out to a parent or grandparents, we get a lot of, right? Like grandparents don't know what to do when their grandkids come out as trans or gay or anything, and it's find your uncomfortability, sit with it, and go do your work, and then enter into a positive relationship, whatever that looks like.
And we're making the work a little bit easier.
Yeah,
because
that's
for
the hope.
those willing to do the work and those willing to enter in, even in discomfort, we have a toolkit in the back of the book that's like, how do you do things like even change your mindset on pronouns, like easy things like change your loved one's name in your phone immediately, talk about them in their correct pronouns when they're not around, like little ways to start ticking through a psychological change so that when you are in relationship, it starts to become second nature. It's like, here's your manual on how to ride a bike, and it's going to be really awkward at first, but then you're going to find your balance and you'll be able to ride it. And you'll be like, I didn't even know how I learned how to ride a bike, And that's the people who are willing to pick something up, who are willing to listen, those are the people, because we don't want to just be shouting at people to love us, because we can't do that. But there are so many people that are dying to love us.
Well, my question would be to a lot of these people, like, why, how does, my gender changing affect you? Why is it something that makes you uncomfortable and makes you feel like you need to do something? Like, why is that a thing at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're asking people to explore. Because if you don't, then you just start shouting and you say, well, my beliefs, this or whatever the case may be, or I'm uncomfortable and I'm not going to enter into this. And so we're asking you to explore why does that make you uncomfortable? Why does my gender, my relationship with my wife, granted, for a parent who had a son and now has a daughter, like that can be very uncomfortable, but you have to figure out why it makes you uncomfortable, right? And that's what we're asking people to do, because there's really no good way forward in relationship, other than setting boundaries where we can honor each other, and it's going to be from a distance probably, because we can't be close, otherwise our boundaries cross. And so we're asking people to enter into that work and figure it out, because it's different for everybody.
Yeah. We love the performance artist and poet Alok. If you don't know about Alok, you should know about Alok 100%. And Alok has this wonderful poem called Your Wound, My Garden. And I think this is why gender journey is so difficult, is because so many of us are wounded in our gender, whether we're cis, straight, like there's so many. There were wounds in my gender. I mean, deep wounds in my own gender that when Nia transitioned, I had to come face to face with, because we all have some sort of woundedness by being seen as something that has a label that means something that maybe it does not mean that thing to us, if that makes sense. But someone putting something over us. And I think instead of, like Nia said, dealing with that internal discomfort because we don't feel seen or we don't feel loved, or we fight that part of us, like we're keeping it under control, we point the finger and become angry at a person, because that's so much easier than saying, I'm sad, I'm heartbroken, I'm grieving, this is difficult, because there's no one to blame in that scenario. It's just work that has to be done. And that's very hard.
Yeah, we're given these gender labels, that we're born into, and they're not just that. It's not just, an M or a W on a birth certificate. It is a whole heaped pile of expectations that we quickly and easily take in on ourselves and use to judge ourselves. It's a yardstick for whether or not we're a valid or valuable person. And yeah, that's going to lead to a lot of trauma, because nobody can really live up to that expectation. So everybody in some regard has some kind of scar about their gender, because they're not this enough or not that enough. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think that's probably why I don't want any labels, because I had to work so hard so, and you know, yeah, I think that there is so much beauty inside of realizing that we don't have to become angry at other people. We can enter work with each other.
You should tell what that looked like practically in the situation that you talk about in the book with the clothes.
Oh, yes, this is a great example. Is when Nia came out, we had this great big walk-in closet, and she took over legitimately almost the entire thing with her array of style choices. Because I mean, and it was like a Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen movie montage
Listen,
from the 90s every day. Outfit, how about this outfit? How about this? And I would sit on the bed and I'd be like, great, this is great. And I would think to myself, what does 13-year-old you need to hear right now? Because that is what Nia needs to hear. She needs to hear that what she is doing and how she is forming her own identity, whether I like these clothes or not, is not the issue. It's how do you feel in them? How does that make you feel? Oh my God, I love like how you're decolletage looks in that top. I would find the positive things inside of me. There was like a lot of turmoil. And I had to look inside of myself and go like, why is this so upsetting to me? And it's because if I looked in that closet, it was almost full of Nia's clothes. This is how much space I had in that closet and 2 other drawers. That is how pared down I had become in my own masking. Because I used to be like this flamboyant, wild child. And by the time that I got to like college, the volume was turned down on that pretty far. And I realized, oh, I stuffed a lot of me in a Goodwill bag and gave it away. You
Because you got
know,
to an age probably where you thought, I shouldn't be like that. I shouldn't dress like this anymore. I shouldn't
I should
be this
buy
way.
a blazer.
Well, and that ties really well into one of my early experiences in working with a therapist who turns out, hindsight, was not very good for me. Um,
Mm,
you know, um, because she was making comments about the age I was dressing and the way I was presenting myself in a lot of ways. And while I understand where she was coming from, kind of trying to protect me from embarrassment or whatever, when you come out as trans, you're basically doing your teenage years over again.
Yeah.
You're
absolutely.
doing that thing that you never got to do as a teen and exploring a new set of things. And I think a lot of us idealize that period. So when we come out, even if we come out in our 30s, we want to dress like teenagers. Like that's the fun stuff. And I really applaud at what you were able to do with that. You were able to kind of do that work and look in on yourself and not share those things with Nia and say, oh, you can't wear that for this, and this reason. You're too old for that. Nobody combines those things, because it's really hard, and that's something that um, it's very easy to put that on somebody and make them feel like that pain that you have inside of like, oh, I can't be this. I can't truly explore this because there are certain bounds and things that are just off limits. And
Mhm.
I can't fully explore this because I need to fit into this mold. And that just kind of takes us from one box that we don't fit in and then squeezes into another box that still doesn't end up working for us.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think it helped too because Nia loved me when I was a weird teenager, and like everybody was like, "What are you doing?" And Nia was like, "I love this," and so I was just like, "Okay, well, that's what we're gonna do." She saw through me through my awkward 13-year-old years. I could do the same for her.
Yeah.
you know, and that made it easier because I actively remembered her loving me through that. So, I mean, you were an awkward 13-year-old too,
I
but
was. Yeah.
Nia, how was like your I think it's like probably the first year, if not the first 2 years when we come out as trans, especially
Oh
like I
yeah.
said, coming out later in life. Do you have a lot of kind of cringeworthy things that you look back on?
Certainly. I mean, you're just trying to find yourself, right? And so finding your style is a big piece of that. And I think for many of us, I wrote a book called The Story of Nib, which was basically, I don't remember if I had it out when we talked last, but it was basically processing therapy sessions. And for me, I realized I had stuffed part of me away when I was 13. And so when you open that box and let that kid out, like, what do you expect that they're going to do? They want to be a 13-year-old and kind of grow through that phase. And so I bought all sorts
They
of
want
weird
a pink
stuff.
lame mini skirt. That's what they want.
Listen, I will stand by that one. That was for an 80s party. But the one that I don't think I can abide anymore was the gold, like, whatever it was.
Off the shoulder.
Off the shoulder, bell sleeve, crop top, Forever 21. But I needed to see myself in that. So I knew, like, okay, this isn't me, or this is fun, and I'm gonna wear this to some weird party that I have, right? But I'm this is not like what I'm gonna wear every day. But I needed that because otherwise I'm just in a suit and going like, what? I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. I'm just following again the mask that has now been given to women to do, and I'm just going to do that too. And so I've had to do a lot of that work myself.
Yeah, I think it was watching you go from a hyper stylized feminine,
Yeah.
into, I remember you saying, I feel so great that I'm in a place in my own journey where I can put on a t-shirt and a pair of jeans and still feel like the woman that I am. And that's the beauty of the journey, is because there's not regret of like, shouldn't I have tried XYZ?
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the key messages to share to people is like, I think it kind of doesn't matter what it is that you wear or you get into. There's going to be that you're still figuring out your style. You're figuring out how to do makeup. Your hair is not the length that you want, and you can't do what you want with it. So it's just going to be an awkward period, regardless. And I love that you were able to give that to her to kind of, okay, go ahead and explore this. You might have some regrets looking back later, but you need that. You need that so much. You need that exploration. You need to be able to push the full bounds of it as you're doing this, so that you truly do get to figure out who you are, what your style is, and all of that. And yeah, our first inclination is to go with absolutely everything pink, floral, butterflies, unicorns, just, Lisa Frank it the way the hell up. And
Yeah.
and yeah, I think I still ended up kind of doing some of that stuff, but that was the part of my journey that was in the closet. I feel like in a lot of ways, but yeah, I think the message that I'm trying to portray here to the audience who's watching this and trying to see, how they're going to approach their journey is just freaking go for it. And just go for it. There's going to be things you're going to regret. There's going to be things that you're going to love regardless. So might as well go all in and be the best you can be.
Yeah, live that style of life.
Yeah, I really think one of the important things here too is that what it allowed me to do was say, what am I doing for others, and what am I doing for my own dysphoria, right? Like, what is truly like me exploring for myself, and what am I putting on for others? Because immediately when before I was out publicly, like, you're trying to do makeup and make yourself feel like you can see yourself in the mirror, right? Like, it's like 50s housewife, like whatever, whatever the trope is. And yes, you may end up with that style, right? But like, you have to be able to explore that yourself versus somebody saying this is how you need to be as a woman. And I think that's what that gave me, was the ability to go like, actually, I didn't really care about my voice being deeper. Like, I did speech therapy, but like, I don't like it because I perceive it makes other people uncomfortable, which I don't care about as much. And it's less about dysphoria, right? So I had to like work through all of those things, but that kind of exploration really helps with that.
Yeah.
All right, we're at about an hour, so let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, I'd love to dive into one of the biggest parts of the journey, especially when you're talking about support systems and things like that, and that is loss. Big part of transitioning. So let's take our break and we'll come back and jump into that. What advice do you have to pass on to young or closeted trans people out there?
And this is probably cliche to death, but I have to say that you have to do what's right for you at a time that's right for you. No one else can make that decision for you. And no one else can push you into something that you're not ready for. You can't live your life to make everyone else happy all the time. Because if you try and do that, you're going to fail. You're never going to make everyone happy.
I think getting a support network and at least telling a few close friends is huge. It's so huge, because those feelings of being alone and not being seen be really devastating. Having the support of a couple of really close friends or family members or whoever you trust is just absolutely huge.
Just find anybody to talk to that you can. That you're trans or you might be trans, or just find somebody you can confide in.
Having a group of friends, no matter how small, or somebody that can back you up and lift you up during it will mean the world. Because at first, everybody is scared. The more you go out, the more you build your confidence in yourself, the less it'll affect you. Everybody feels it and will continue to feel it. And it's just whether or not you let it overtake you and control you, or you let it go past.
Almost every relationship has grown deeper as a result of sharing this deeper part of myself. So I think there's something to finding your community to get to expand with and reinforce, but I think it then amplifies into almost every other relationship you can have.
I think that there's a struggle to transition the right way. Everyone's going to transition on a different timeline, in different order of operations, and as long as it happens how they want it to happen, that's a valid transition. And not transition is valid.
I do struggle with this. I should follow my own advice. Don't focus on regretting things, not ever not starting early enough or anything like that, because then you'll just go through a loop and just constantly think about it, and it's not something you can change.
I didn't take anything for granted. Every positive change, even most of the time, I swear it was just a placebo where I noticed some growth in places that I wanted growth, or I would notice really subtle things. I swear every single day for that first year. And those are I looked at the victories more than I looked at anything else. And I think that's super important during the first year.
So much of transitioning is was just waiting on something. Waiting for things to happen in your body, waiting for things to happen in your brain, waiting for surgeries, waiting for name changes. Be patient, because what's waiting for you at the end is so worth everything that you felt, all the hurt that you felt, all the anguish that you felt, all the anxiety. It just makes everything so much better. I can't describe the feeling of waking up and getting to be me, this person that I've wanted to be my entire life, this person that I've known I was my entire life. It just makes everything so worth it.
I would go back and say, look, you're going to go through a lot of crap and it's going to be hard, but it's going to make you a better person to go through it, and you'll be fine. Just know you'll be fine. That's the main point they want to make.
You have to be you. You can't hide who you are. You have to be you. And I know that it's going to be scary and you're going to get bullied a lot. So be you, but do it in a safe way. Don't ever put yourself in danger. But also, don't cower down because it's going to be hard. Because life is hard.
It is scary, but hopefully it's worth it. And most of the time it is worth it to truly be you, whatever form that looks like. I've always been happy, but I didn't know, and I didn't know peace and joy the way that I know it now. And it was a bit of a struggle at first, but I would do it a million times over. And one of the things that I say often in my lives is do it scared. Yeah, it's scary. Then do it scared.
Whatever you choose to do, whether it's come out or not come out, transition or not transition, start hormones, have surgery, any and all of it is whatever you do it for you. Do it for you and you alone. Don't do it for anybody else. Don't do it because your friends are doing it, or don't not do it because your parents said no, or whatever you do it for you. Because in the end, the person you're most accountable to in this life is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever you're comfortable with, like even if you're trans and you know it, but you're legitimately fine with not doing anything about it, do that for you, and that's okay. There's no wrong way to be trans. Just be you. The only person you're ever answerable to at the end of the life is yourself.
Your journey is your own. No one can tell you how to transition. No one can tell you what it's supposed to look like, because we're all different.
I had moments coming out that I did it on other people's timeline because they asked me to, and were I to do it again, I wouldn't do that. It's something that's very personal. Either you might not want to come out, or you might want to come out, and people are stopping you. And I think it's a very personal thing, and so making sure that's on your timeline is important.
You need to always ask questions about who are you, and is that really you, or is that something that has been manufactured for you and you have just latched your identity to that?
Love yourself. Love who you know that you truly are. And when you do, you will inspire and compel other people to love you as well.
Give yourself room, imagine yourself as that seed, and that all the energy, all the life, all the creativity, all that you could ever imagine is already there. It's already inside of that seed, and all the nourishment is already inside of that seed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the soil you choose to plant yourself in, all right, the sun that you choose to receive, how many times you choose to water yourself, who you let water you, that is totally up to you, and you have autonomy no matter what situation you're in, right? Know that how you choose to love yourself in your mind and your sacred space is the most important, and no one can take that away from you, even if you have to fake it until you make it for right now.
Constantly remind yourself that you're valid, you're gonna be okay, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's your life, and you only get one. Being that you only have the one, wouldn't you rather have lived it to the best of your abilities and as yourself, with a modicum, hopefully, of happiness?
You don't have to do this alone, but if you feel like it's something that you need to do, then do it. There's people that will be here to catch you.
There are a lot of us out there. We are everywhere. And so you are not alone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for hanging out there in chat. We have a big conversation that's been going on for a while, and so I'm hoping to relay all of it. I think I caught the beginning of it, so I'm gonna pass it on to our folks here, and then as I teased before we went to break, we're gonna go ahead and talk in this section a lot about loss and how to deal with that. Okay, so in the chat, what we had, Doors and Dungeons said, do you think strict religious conservative backgrounds cause trans people to delay transition until 30s, 40s due to internalized queerphobia and external pressures? Or do you think that a bigger issue might simply be the shift in trans acceptance from the 90s to the 2020s?
Yes. For sure. I mean, both and, right?
Yeah.
Like it's easier to be an out queer trans person. It depends on where you're at in the country and what country you're in and all of that, but it generally is easier to be out and trans. And I also know from experience, it's generally really hard to come out in that type of environment. I know I can almost guarantee if I would have come out at a young age, I would have been sent to conversion therapy, because that, that was a thing and still is a thing that happens. And so your built-in protection mechanism is there to make sure that you aren't harmed in that kind of way, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think society is fed by, a lot our religious beliefs. And as those begin to expand, as our spiritual beliefs become, well, maybe it's more polarized right now. And so you're able to say more just because it's not as status quo. And the more polarized something is, sometimes the easier it is to say, I stand on this side of that. And then I think COVID really allowed people the time and the space to not have interaction on a daily basis with other people that they were presenting themselves for.
Yeah. Time and space is a big one. And when you're in a religious environment, you don't have that. Right. And so that's definitely a big piece.
Well, and there's two pieces to the question there. It talks about internalized queerphobia and external pressures, or do you think that the bigger issue is the shift in acceptance? Like, the shift in acceptance was required for me to really understand that I was trans. I had this like cross-dressing tendency or whatever, and it wasn't until I saw people come out as trans and learned about and understood their stories that I saw how mine was similar or the same. And that helped kind of illuminate things. And then once I came to that realization, it all made sense. And so it was all much easier. But, the internalized queerphobia, it was a huge part also of why it was difficult to get to that understanding, but then also very difficult to progress in early transition, because I had all of those negative voices in my head constantly shouting down everything I was trying to do, everything I was trying to feel good about in myself.
Yeah, I mean, even after I let Katie in and came out to her as trans, and then we were another 6 months in, and a book called The Coming Out Guide, the LGBTQ Christian Coming Out Guide by Amber Cantorna Wild. And it gave you a list of things, and it said, like, do you think these things about others? And they were all like transphobic, homophobic things. And I'm like, no, of course I don't. And then she puts the same list on the other page and says, do you think these things about yourself? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a problem, right? Like, this stuff is in there deep. It's in there really deep. And that was a moment for me. I was like, okay, like, I've got to do something about this and address these.
And I'm not sure who the user Papa George 3 is, but they seem to know you very well. Do you know who that is?
We do. Yes, we do.
Because they say
I want
it's
to hear his question before.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Before we tell you who he is, I want to hear his question.
Okay. Well, he just said it's especially the first one, the conservative backgrounds and the internalized queerphobia and external pressures, because when Nia was a kid, she grew up with very traditional parents, so it was hard to tell Also, her family taught her to believe in transphobia, so she didn't exactly know what to think, and she found herself only when she was older and separated from her family more often.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's our oldest son. And I'm glad he's astute in that way, because these are, I mean, these are, we've had conversations with him, right? But like we haven't had that kind of conversation, and it's a very astute thing.
I mean, our children see our lives. We don't shield, I mean, we shield them from what they need to be shielded from, but you know, we also live a very open family life. So that's lovely.
Yeah.
So Doors and Dungeons comes back and says, I asked from my own experience. I figured out I was trans at 17 and tried to come out, but was basically forced by Christianity, the Christian environment, and family pressure to go back into the closet. But ultimately, the changing in acceptance over time allowed me more access to healthcare and therapy and such. But in the 20s, I feel like I've been in a journey of undoing this still. There are internalized queer phobias and self-acceptance issues, and I think that's something that we all still kind of deal with for a long time into it. Do you feel like that's something that's still adding a tint to things when you think about them, Nia?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's as much as a tint anymore. Like that, it's there once in a while. There'll be like a twinge of something where it's like, oh, you know, you see another trans person and you have, and it's like, where did that come from? Like that's a judgment of me. That's not a judgment of them. Or you feel like you're being judged in a moment when it's like, oh, that's from back then, right? Like that is not the way I feel about things now. And that pops up every now and then for me, but not regularly anymore. I think I'm finally, the move from Iowa to here, it was the thing for me that got me to that point where I'm living my life now as a person and not as a trans person necessarily, where I was seen as a trans person in Iowa. And that's where I have been given the space to not have that twinge so often.
When I love Dungeon's follow-up on that, they say I came out again in 2011, and the past 13 years have been on the journey to try and figure myself out, make changes, and try to find access to healthcare and all the things. The process of deprogramming has been recent, though, and I find it interesting because despite being out for so long, I didn't see the need to address the internalized queerphobic programming until the last couple years. And I think it's funny, like, you know, how our brains work, how working through things with therapy, how that all works. Like, you can get to a really good place with a certain aspect of it and gloss over, ignore another part that just kind of stays there and festers until you have to actually address head on each of these different issues.
Yeah, I mean, they're all different and they'll all come up at different times. And, you know, anger, grief and loss, all the different things, judgment of yourself, judgment of others, the internalized shame. They're all separate issues and you have to deal with all of them, and they're all intertwined as well. And so one thing may twinge another. You know, when I go back and I'm trying to have a conversation with my parent about who I am still, it twinges all of this other stuff, all of this shame, all of this transphobia that used to be there. And I have to like really understand that. Otherwise, it just pulls me right back to where I was.
Yeah. It's it's so sad, and we've touched on this a couple times already, but you know, those things that people, the internalized things that people are dealing with, the things that they feel about themselves. And I think that's why there's so much of a backlash. You know, there's so much homophobia and transphobia and stuff out there, and there's all of this pushback against us when we're breaking these boundaries. We're kind of we're redefining things. We're making definitions challenging and all of that, when there are people, you know, like you were saying before, Katie, that have these sort of little traumas, micro traumas, big traumas, whatever, based on who they've thought that they needed to be their whole life. And, you know, a lot of this anger is clearly projection. You know, they're just projecting onto us, using us as scapegoats, or kind of being pissed off of like, why do you get to be whoever you want to be? I never got to, you know, these sort of things. What are some of the things that that you've kind of thought around this, and how have you approached those?
Oh, me. I think that this is hard. I think that what I said about my own journey with Nia and her clothing is kind of like a great example of that, of this idea that I had to deal with my own discomfort. Help me here. I can get me on my footing.
Yeah, I mean, people have said that to us, right? Like, you didn't get to be you, so I didn't get to be me, so you don't get to be you. Like, that's been said directly. And I think so many people in relationship with queer people, queer joy is a thing that rubs people the wrong way because it's freedom. And when you see that, and I don't have that freedom, I just don't know what to do with that. And so I have to be mad at them ultimately because they're who they are and I don't get to be who I am. I literally had a family member say, like, well, I don't get to be who I want to be. So, like, why should you?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem fair.
I think it's sad too that it turns into fear instead of wonder. And I think that's kind of just where we maybe are in society right now, that we feel so protective of ourselves and everything that we believe. Because that's the real beauty and the real invitation of transness and the real invitation of queerness is to say, like, yes, you can. You can be who you are. I'm doing it. You should also consider, like, maybe if you're uncomfortable, it's because you're not letting enough of yourself out. And when those of us who are confronted with that invitation are able to say, yeah, I want to explore that invitation, when we open our hearts and minds to it, we can discover all sorts of wonderful things about ourselves. Now, not all of us are going to discover that we're also queer. I just happened to discover that. But I think that people really do discover so many beautiful and wonderful things about their capacity for love and how you set yourself free when you're able to change your perspective on your own discomfort from anger to wonder.
So we've we teased it and we've avoided it long enough. What are some of the things that you have learned about loss and how to deal with it, and that you've shared in the book?
So when we were going through this process, we ran across this wonderful psychiatrist and author. Her name is Dr. Pauline Boss, and she coined this phrase, ambiguous loss. And what ambiguous loss is one of two things: either physically present and mentally unavailable, mentally or emotionally unavailable, in the case of like dementia, where someone is present but isn't emotionally there for you, or emotionally present but not physically present. So this would be like a soldier who's missing in action, or another sort of non-closure loss where there's not closure to the loss. And it resonated so deeply with me inside of our journey, where I still have all of Nia. I have so much of her. I have a fullness of her, but there's these other things that I am losing. And then there's other parts of my identity that I'm losing. And we contacted her team and we said, does this sound like ambiguous loss? And they were like, yes, absolutely. This sounds like ambiguous loss, because there's no tight bow you can put on it and say, oh, grief is over. Like you can do that with any grief. You can't. But there's never a real closing event. Yeah. And so what we found is that understanding our own grief process is really important, because letting go requires some grief. There will be things that have served us very well that still have to leave. And we could have loved those things a lot. Or we could have grief around what we didn't get to experience. There's just so much. And when we allow ourselves to feel those feelings of grief and don't go, well, I'm not supposed to feel that because this is supposed to be like a happy journey. Like, we have to acknowledge those feelings. Otherwise, they'll just grow inside of us into a place that they could develop into bitterness and resentment. So acknowledging that loss, allowing yourself to be angry or sad or confused, all of those things are so important to our continued resilience as we move forward.
Mm. And what are some of the things that you say towards the trans individual who is going through it and is afraid of loss of partner, of family members,
Mhm.
of job? And for a lot of us, there is a great deal of reality in that. Some of it's, we enter into it with a lot of fear that will be the
Mhm.
case. And a lot of that fear is realized. So what are some of the keys that you try and teach in the book to deal with that in a healthy way that allows you to still move forward in a way that is necessary for you, again, to explore the full depth of who you are and need to be, and move forward and be able to find those people? Because I think, when you start losing a bunch, it can be really difficult to trust people enough to build that support network sometimes. So I've
Mhm.
thrown a lot at you. What do you have to say about some of those thoughts?
I think the first thing is you can't be yourself without risk.
Mhm.
And for me, when I came home to Katie, when I realized I was trans and I was coming home to her, I'm driving home thinking like, I'm just gonna head here. I'm gonna be like, so what about trans people? Like maybe I could be trans. Like let me gauge her reaction. And then if she's like, no, you're not trans, then I'd be like, yeah, you're right, I'm not trans. Like it's fine. But that's not honoring to myself. And it's not fully realizing my journey right in that moment. And so I did realize that on my drive home. Thankfully it was long enough. And I said to myself, I'm just going to come out and tell her. Like, I have to do that to honor myself. And there's a certain amount of risk with that, right? Like, as loving and supportive as she is, I didn't know where that left us. I didn't know if we were going to get divorced. I knew that, like, ultimately, her rejection of me as a trans person was not me as a person necessarily, because, like, maybe our sexualities weren't compatible or whatever anymore. But it still was risky. Like everything in that moment was, when I said those words out loud, is just hanging there. And so there is a certain amount of risk that comes with trying to be ourselves. And so with that risk comes the inevitability of loss, really. Like it's unavoidable. And so knowing how to handle that and finding one person, one therapist, right? Like one trusted person that you can process some of that loss with, because it will happen. And when it does, you have to be able to have someone to build you back up, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, you might not have this big network, and you might have your whole entire family say, we're done, we're not going to talk to you anymore.
Mhm.
And that's really hard. And so you have to have somebody before, at least one person before you start in on that, because if you end up flailing out on your own in that kind of heavy loss, and that's all around you is loss, and there's nobody there to pick you up, that becomes super difficult. And so we really talk about find your therapist, find, these, even if it is a therapist, a doctor, if you can find a friend,
Mhm.
online communities like yours and others are very
Very
helpful.
important.
I know they were for me. Like I was able to make friends with people, even when you're not talking to people who are next to you. Like you can say, this really sucks. My parents have disowned me. Like, I don't know what to do about this. And the person can say, I'm sorry. Like, that stinks. You are valuable and you are worth this loss, right? Like
Mhm.
it may not be worth it to you right now, but like you are worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I answered all your questions in there. There was a
No,
lot
because
of stuff.
there were like 6 questions in there. I was thinking through it as I was asking it, I think. So there was a lot to it. Um, what what are some of those keys? You know, I like to focus, you know, the focus of this show is really for the people who are looking to come out, who are on that precipice and are afraid, they're unsure and all of that. And you're looking at this and you know, for me, I was not afraid that people wouldn't accept me. I was absolutely positive that there was no way that people could accept me. And that really held me back until the point where it just sort of exploded out, where almost like it was uncontrollable because my subconscious just needed to get it out to a point. So for the people that that aren't to that desperation point that I got to, you know, how do you look at a transition that is going to be loss, that is going to experience loss, and have the courage to move forward in it?
Hope. I mean, I think hope is the scary thing that like you have to lean into. And for me, I knew deep down I was not going to be accepted by my family. I really did. Um, but I just had this hope, and I I remember writing a piece just for myself that was about like I was talking to an older gentleman who knew about me, and um, we were just talking about some different things, and he was like, you know, it may change, and I'm like, it's not going to change. Like, and this was after, you know, a couple weeks after I'd come out, and he was like, well, it may, and we always advise people not to tell people that because you don't have any clue what's going to happen in the future, right? Like, you shouldn't say, well, it'll be fine, but you can hope, and you can work towards that hope, because if you don't have that, it does prohibit you from moving into who you are. Um, and so I think for me, that was the big thing, is having a little sliver of hope. And then it was dashed, right? And when I came out, and I had to say, okay, I hope we can move toward something that I see as reconciliation. And as time has gone on, I've had to change that and say, I hope that I can be myself and you can be yourself, and you know, we have to admire each other from a distance. And my hope isn't for this like whole relationship that you know, I think might be ideal in most people's minds, but it's for something where we can respect one another from a distance and, you know, continue life.
Yeah, I think hope is such an important part. I think also watching from this side, it's like watching someone, you know, I've sat and watched a lot of people give birth. I've like held space for birthing people, a lot of birthing people, and watched what that takes, what labor takes. You know, it takes so much for people. It is, in some cases, brutal. It's so difficult. And there are things associated with birth that we lose. We lose our singleness. We lose different parts of ourselves. We are birthed into this new identity. And that is what is happening. There's a gestating period that has to happen, right? Where you start to understand yourself, you start to grow. And then there's a period of birthing that is difficult. It hurts, it's painful, but in the end, you have this beautiful individual. And there is so much risk involved in that, but we keep doing it because of the hope of what that individual then can bring into the world. And that is what I think, would really like people to know and understand, is that you're birthing your own self into this world that might be hostile, but in a weird way, you're also your own birthing person. And so you get the choice of how you come into the world because you get to take care of you as you go through this. And that's very difficult, which is why we always say, try to find a therapist, try to find a doctor, try to find a trusted friend. But ultimately, you belong to yourself now. And that's really lovely. And it's really hard. And you grow into both of those roles.
Well, and yeah, that was sort of the thing I was thinking that would be my response to that as well, is that we're so much more open and so much better on the other side. We're able finally to have true, open, and meaningful connections with people on a level that we weren't able to before because we were so held back in that box that, you know, we're able to build deeper, more true connections with people. And even if that process of that, the birthing process, I love that analogy, is painful and you do lose folks, the person that you are on the other side of it, because it's really truly who you are and you're finally able to be yourself, is better able to then be in the world and to interact with people and deal with all of the things that are thrown at you, that, you know, it's kind of worth whatever you go through in that birthing process, because it's just so hard to live in that shell and not recognize and not be who you truly are.
Yeah, I think that's really good too, because like when you're in that moment before birth, right? Like you're experiencing the world as you are. And so you're saying you're projecting into the future. Well, if I have all this loss and stuff, how am I supposed to deal with it? But to your point, you're going to become a different person.
Yeah.
And that's super helpful. And I know for me, hope propelled me in that direction. And I know Katie would say at this point, hope it can harm, right? Like it can continue to harm if you continue to lean into this. But for me, being who I am has allowed me connections with people who I never would have had before. I wouldn't have, because I was not open. I was not me.
You've built a marvelous web. We've built a marvelous web of family and people who love us and that we love. And the authenticity of that love is so tight and deep. It's different.
And never could have seen that before, right? Like you can't not project that into the future. You're just going like, well, if I'm losing all my family and all my friends, then I'm alone. But as a genuine person, you're going to draw people to you who you have genuine connections with.
One of the things I've been kind of thinking about, you know, and thinking in terms of your move away from the place that you grew up and spent your entire lives and built all of that, all of the, you know, the family and the relationships and that community. And then you move away and you're finally able to establish yourselves in a spot as who you are. There's nobody that knows you as anything else. And as a trans person, that's wonderful. And as a quick tangent, I have found that it's I lean towards it's much easier for me to go and hang out with friends that just know me since I came out, that know me as me, versus the people that knew me before. Even if they are accepting, it's sort of like the people that have only known me as this there's something easier about it. But my question is in thinking about that and being able to get there and establish this and move away from that spot, did that move kind of jostle people enough to be like, oh, I'm like losing this person? You know, I've lost them because I've sort of rejected them, but now they're physically moving away. Did that change any of the relationships that were maybe sort of strained when you were there and make them easier?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think we had worked so hard to preserve the relationships that we could while we were there. And, you know, by the time that we moved, it was clear some relationships were just going to have to go their own way. Now, what I will say is, while we were in that process of clarifying those people in our lives who were going to stick around and, you know, be part of our lives, boundaries were an important part of that, because when we drew boundaries, then people could understand we're going to be ourselves no matter what. And you get to opt in or out of that relationship. And so that was helpful because it allowed people to opt in or out of the relationship. The boundaries allowed them to do that. And that was before our move.
Mm-hmm.
Another quick tangent that's a personal one. I just realized in between therapy sessions, actually, and I messaged my therapist about this because it was so profound. I said, I don't like boundaries. And the reason that, that this was the epiphany, the reason I don't like boundaries is because you set up a hard line that people at some point are going to cross or push, and it's going to cause conflict. You're going to have to, stand up for yourself, and you're going to have to be the one that's bringing the conflict, seemingly, because they've, disrespected your boundary. And, it was just such an interesting revelation for me of why I struggle to understand boundaries and understand how to set them and to stick by them. Because, again, going back to that belief, that understanding, when we're trans as youth, we understand that, like, we have to be what others want us to be. We don't get to be our true selves. And so, like, when you start setting boundaries, it's like you have to be your true self, and you have to hold others accountable for that, which is, I mean, like I said, that's conflict. That's tough, and I don't want to do it. But it's funny how, because it's so valuable to do that.
Yeah. And I think really it's holding yourself accountable to your own self-respect, because there's so much that we will take for ourselves that we would never take for other people. A great example of this is after Nia came out, there were people in our lives who were like, well, we understand what's happening here, but we don't agree with you. And how about if we just don't call you a name? Like, we just won't call you a name or a pronoun. Like, we're not ready to switch, but we just won't call you anything. And Nia was like, yeah, like, I could tell she was not like thrilled with this. And she's like, maybe we could make that work. And I said, no. And this has become a line that we say in our house a lot. And I said, even dogs have names. Like, a dog is not getting more respect in that relationship than you are. For me, that's a line. And then, so the boundary became, when you are able, or if you would like to be in relationship, my name and pronouns are non-negotiable for me. And so if you'd like to opt into that, you may do that. And if you can't do that right now, I'm really sorry. But for my own self-protection and my own love of myself, I have to earn more respect than a dog in your eyes,
I wish I'd had that confidence in those words, because like, for the longest time, I just wished my parents would get to that point of just don't say my name, don't use any pronouns, because it got to this point, like, having conversations with them, and in a paragraph they would say my name like 2 or 3 times. It's like, I'm talking to you. I know that you're talking to me. I understand that you and I are in a conversation. You don't have to say a name in that, let alone the wrong freaking name.
Right.
Just
Mm-hmm.
don't say anything.
It's bizarre how that happens. I mean, truly, like, there is no need to do that when you're talking to someone face to face. And I had the same experience, even though we said this is the boundary, and each time I walked into that relationship, it got crossed. I needed that boundary early on to form my identity, to have that safety to form it. And now, I mean, 5-6 years later, I don't need that boundary as much. Like, I could enter into a relationship, I think, with my mom and have her be like, yes, I'm not going to call you anything. And I'd be fine with that. Now, she would continue to call me my old name to my face, weirdly, but for me, that boundary has shifted out further because I don't need it to have that protection around myself.
I want to clarify too that there's a difference between refusing to use name and pronouns and messing up. Because when we made that distinct boundary, people were able to choose in or out of that boundary, saying, yes, I will do this. And then once they said, yes, I will do this, then we could hold them accountable to saying the correct name and pronoun. So people mess up all the time. It's just like nature of the beast, right? When you're first transitioning, it's going to happen. But we knew the difference when someone was being really dug their heels in and was like, no, thank you. I'm not going to use your name and pronouns. And then someone who would say the wrong name and then, oh, sorry, and then say the correct name. And then, oh, shoot, I did it again. And that's okay. That was okay because they are also working on a journey. And that was great. But they had said yes to the journey.
Yeah,
because we had drawn
if they're showing the
boundaries.
evidence that they're actually trying, they're progressing, there is some give, some trying on their end, it's so much easier to accept, right? And to go with.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one of the things, we're just going to go about this completely backwards. One of the things that I wanted to get to that we haven't touched on at all is sort of the first bit of it. How did this book come about in actuality? Who approached who about this idea, and why did it become a book between the two of you?
We may have one of the weirder book stories. I actually was working on a book proposal about spiritual doulaship, sitting with someone in the spiritual progression, spiritual transformation of life. And I had written my proposal, and I had a lot of people around me at the time saying, you need to just send it and see what happens. And so I sent it in to one publisher.
Really?
Yeah, it was the one. And I was like, winging a prayer, let's see how it goes. And when you send a book proposal, you have to also include your bio and like some things about yourself. So I had included some bits and pieces about our relationship. And the acquisitions editor got back to me and said, hey, this book proposal is too niche, but I saw this story in your bio, and I'm wondering, can you write that book? And I was like, what book? And she was like, that book, basically, like that thing. And so I said, well, I can't do it without my wife, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that. And they had not done a joint author book before. And so it was a lot of back and forth of like, what do we really want this to look like? And are we just going to tell our story, or what do people really need? And I think it was really such a beautiful collaboration between our acquisitions editor and then our text editor and ourselves, kind of saying this is what we'd like to say to people. And then saying to us, like, I don't get it. Can you please rephrase it until I understand? And so it was like this lovely group project that we were able to do that really feels like a love letter. We sat down at the beginning of writing and we said, we want this to be a hopeful, loving look at what it can be like to go through this process. That was very important to us.
And a guidebook. I mean, they were really specific about there's no guidebook for families, right? And so they wanted that, and in a guidebook for a family, like, we can tell you our experience and what has been helpful for us, but it may not be helpful for you. But we do think that you can enter into these relationships in a positive manner, no matter the outcome, right? Mm-hmm. From a spousal perspective, if we stay together or not, from, whatever the relationship is, like, there can be positive outcomes when we enter into them.
And we thought about what did we need when we went through this journey. And because when we were going through this journey, I mean, thank God we were in a place of maturity and self-awareness, self-differentiation. And so we were at a place where we could say, this is the actual like framework that we used, and we used it. Where we're not just saying like, maybe you should try it. We did it, And so for us, this is what worked. And that's why we call it a guidebook. It's not a how-to. It's not a like this, follow the checklist, because life is not that. In the book, we say process over perfection. That's something that we say in our family all the time, process over perfection, because perfection is non-existent. process is ever unfolding, and we're going to mess up, and it's not going to be right, and your process is going to be different than my process. But what we can do is sit with each other as we go through that process and all the messiness, bear witness to one another, and love each other well through it. And that's what we're hoping people can see inside of the book.
What a perfect soundbite, and what a great place to end. But before I really close things up, I want to give you all a chance to promote anything else or to talk about any other aspects of the book that we really didn't get to. Is there anything else that we've missed?
You know, I think one of the most impactful things for me when we were going through our journey was learning new scripts of, like, you know, when you go through certain changes, there's scripts that you have that you know what to say. And then there's things you go through in your life where you just have no idea what to say. And so in the book, we kind of help give sample scripts about, like, what might a boundary sound like? What might it sound like to stand up for your loved one? You know, what might it sound like? What might it sound like to not pigeonhole your child into a certain gender or sexuality? Like, what little changes in our conversations can we make? What little changes in our ways of thinking can we make to make it so that our language can also accept what's happening? Because our thinking follows our language. And so for me, scripts were so important. And we give examples of them so that people can make their own scripts, but they have a framework to be able to do that.
The other thing I would say, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's wonderful. That is so much of something. It's funny, you know, I've done this for a while, and I'm pretty far along in my transition, but there are still aspects that are difficult even for me. And having that example of these scripts of, like, here's how you can approach this, here's how you can kind of think about these things in a real context. You know, a lot of times you're reading through this book and it's like, yeah, you got these big concepts, but you struggle to apply it to your own life and to actually do something. So those scripts, I think that's such a valuable thing that you've added in there. I love that.
Yeah, listen, we all need to know what to say when we don't know what to say. So we figured out ours. So you can borrow ours for a while to figure out yours.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we've been touching on this whole time is the community aspect, right? This is completely informed by our experience in our communities that we were in that lifted us up. And with that, we had conversations with people when we were writing the book to get different perspectives about how their journeys went. And so we've started to release some of those in a podcast called Love in the Face, Embracing Queer Family. And it's just these conversations of wonderful people who were alongside us for the journey or have a journey that is completely different than ours. And we wanted to kind of highlight. So the aspect of community, we kind of talk about a lot at the end of the book and how we can kind of lift each other up, right, through being ourselves. And I think if you listen to the podcast, which I would encourage folks to do, they just get to hear all sorts of cool stories.
Yeah, in that same vein, we've included stories from our community in the book. So friends of ours wrote excerpts we call them lean-ins in the book. We have separate lean-ins where we kind of talk about specific things specific to each of us. And then we had our friends. So we said, hey, you were really supportive in this way, or hey, you had difficulty with this, and then something changed. Like, how did you do that? And it's lovely. We have lovely people who not all were like ready and chomping at the bit to be accepting, but who gradually over time did accept. And then we have people who are like, oh my God, yeah, I loved everything about it from the very beginning. You know, that's my sister. She's like, hooray, I'm so glad, you know, so.
And we were trying to really build on different people's emotions, right?
Yeah.
When I come out to somebody, you feel this way and you feel that way, we want to include those because our readers are going to be feeling all those different ways, right? When somebody comes out to them. So our readers, hopefully, if they're not in the coming out process, but are being come out too, can feel that they're not alone in this journey too.
Sorry, I wanted to add the cover in and show it here one last time as we wrap up here. The book is Embracing Queer Family. We've been talking with Nia and Katie Chiaramonte.
Chiaramonte.
Chiaramonte?
Mm-hmm.
Probably should have asked that in the pre-thing. I don't think I ever said your last name before, Nia. Yeah. So definitely check it out. It sounds like it's an absolute must read. I have a pre-edit copy that I'm gonna go ahead and finish up now, and I'm really looking forward to going all the way through it, and I appreciate the work that you've done in putting this together and what it will mean for our community as far as some of those scripts, some of those guideposts and those things that will help people go through this journey. I really appreciate what you've done.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the community.
Yeah.
We're all doing this thing together. So we're able to put a voice, but we're all living it and we're doing it together.
Well, Nia and Katie, thank you so much for coming on the Transgender Show and sharing your story with us and sharing so much about this wonderful book. And again, thank you for writing it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having us.
having us.